Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, the governor gave his State of the State tonight, and while we may not agree on the path on the way to get there, we did find that there are some shared goals in that, in his agenda and our agendas. So I would say I don't think the governor answered this question tonight, but I would say that the State of the State is optimistic. I think folks in Minnesota are optimistic that our better days are ahead, but we should take things like the declining revenue in the last forecast as a cautionary note that there are things that we can do much better, and we challenge the governor to do that. I personally was glad to hear the governor talk about the need for road and bridge infrastructure funding. I think we've got an opportunity to find some common ground on that. We obviously believe very strongly that we have the existing resources to do that and make that investment that Minnesotans expect. We also believe that Minnesotans aren't feeling the kind of budget surplus that the state has right now, and we worry a lot about those declining revenue sources. So we think that this is a good opportunity to make a commitment to Minnesotans to put some money back in their pockets, and we think that targeted tax relief at middle-class Minnesotans will be something that will spur some economic growth and pull us out of what looks like a declining recovery. So I'm also disappointed the governor didn't address the mining issue a little more tonight. The governor sent a letter earlier this week indicating his lack of willingness to expand mining and invest in our mining industry on the range, promoting and supporting much needed jobs on the Iron Range. So disappointed the governor didn't address that tonight, but I think we do have some things that we can work on together, and I'm optimistic about that. So Senator Hand?
Yeah, I think we'd agree the State of the State is good, but maybe in need of a little bit of a change. I think the governor said his #1 priority was to protect the fiscal integrity of the state. That's certainly something we can all agree on, and we are committed to help work toward that goal. But we do have some questions in the course of his explaining of that there were 4 or 5 new significant spending initiatives that the governor has announced, and we're not sure how that fits into the protecting the integrity of the state. And I think there was not a whole lot of attention paid to the need to look at our tax structure and the kinds of incentives that we're putting out there to make our economy stronger and more viable. I think the one thing that to me was new and interesting the governor said is he kind of promised to bring more snow to the state. I don't know if that's in the bonding bill or not, but we'll be glad to work with him on that. We all love the snow. So, but in terms of what was actually said, not very much specific, but we are committed to work with the governor and the party on the other side to try to bring about the best for the state of Minnesota. But we do think that we need to look at tax reform, and we need to look at how we can do transportation without increasing the tax burden.
I would just say that a couple of my takeaways, I'm glad the governor is still talking about transportation. He said he put forward a plan last year, and as you recall, it was a 6 to 16 cent per gallon gas tax, and then he later said that was dead. And then tonight I was kind of hoping he would talk about that a little bit more, about what his proposal was. We put together a very robust proposal that uses current taxes, doesn't create any new taxes. So I'm hoping that he will be willing to work with us to look forward to that proposal. It's very robust. We spent a lot of time working on it. We think it's a proposal that will meet his goal of spending $7 billion over the next 10 years. And then I would say I was happy to hear that he is interested in providing some modest middle-class tax relief. I hope we can, maybe make that a little bit more robust as well. So those are a couple of my takeaways. Was a little concerned about some of the additional spending proposals he mentioned. We do have to make sure our house is in fiscal order, so any additional spending proposals will be a little bit challenging. So with that, I guess we'll take questions.
Mr. Speaker, the governor said it would be cruel to delay the unemployment benefits for the Iron Range. He promised to work with you to work on that business tax cut for the unemployment fund. Will you separate those two issues, or where does that stand?
I think we would be open to having that discussion. We don't understand the problem with them being together. Obviously, the policy that's in that bill is something Democrats have supported in the past at a larger level when there was a lower surplus. We are committed to providing unemployment insurance benefit extension to those who are hurting on the range and need that help. We also are committed to long-term job growth on the Iron Range and a commitment that the Iron Range isn't the Iron Range isn't dying. It's maybe in its earliest years, and its best years are ahead. And I think we have some great resources on the Iron Range that maybe need some support and investment from our governor. And as I said earlier, I'm disappointed that he didn't talk about that. I was disappointed in the letter that he sent earlier this week to Twin Metals, kind of preventing further exploration and expansion of mining in northern Minnesota.
But on the unemployment issue, will there be a delay until next week? The Senate's going to do a separate bill tomorrow just on the unemployment.
Sure, we are in conversations about that, and I'm sure that we can find some common ground. I have yet to hear anyone say that the other provisions that are in that bill are controversial. The governor didn't say it tonight. Nobody said it on the House floor yesterday, and the reality is those are not controversial provisions.
I'll finish. Go ahead and finish.
I was just going to repeat myself again, so go ahead.
What's your aversion to a clean bill?
I would ask them what their aversion is to passing something they've passed in the past when they had complete control of state government. The other provisions in that bill are non-controversial. And this may be the only bill we pass that deals with unemployment insurance. So we think it's important that we do deal with both issues. It's unfortunate that the governor and other Democrats are choosing to play politics with this issue, and I have yet to hear one of them say that they don't support those other policies. I didn't hear it on the House floor yesterday, and I didn't hear it from the governor tonight. And the reality is we do have to deal with both of those issues. If we don't, we're going to have $1.8 billion of surplus in the $1.8 billion of money. About $800 million of that would be surplus in that unemployment trust fund. And frankly, we think it's better to have those dollars back in the economy where they can help grow the economy, and we think that would be the sort of thing that could really help stop this, reverse in our revenues at the state and help turn the economy around. Other questions?
The governor talked about racial disparities a lot. That's been a point of contention. Do you think that there's room for agreement in that area this year?
I hope so. I mean, we feel that we want every Minnesotan to have the opportunity to be successful. Unfortunately, we know that the high achievement gap is directly connected to the disparity in wages, and we don't know how you solve one without solving the other, or at least making some headway to reduce them. And we are committed to that. We want to make sure that kids in Minneapolis have a 100% chance of graduating, not less than 50%. Minority students I'm talking about. So, it's a shame that we're leaving those kids behind, and we need to make sure that we give them every opportunity to be successful. We also need to make sure that we are creating a strong and growing, thriving economy in the state of Minnesota where every Minnesotan can successfully participate and be successful and have those opportunities. So we're committed to both.
The governor has said previously that he has sought input from the NAACP, some of the chapters, neighborhoods organizing for change in some of these groups as he goes about formulating his proposals on racial disparities. Have House Republicans done similar outreach to some of those groups, or what might be informing some of the Republicans' proposals on that issue?
And I think the chairs of the working groups have reached out, and they did that through the working groups, obviously, that we had while we were considering special session. I will note that the governor indicated that he wanted a $15 million bill during special session negotiations, and then spent 2 months saying he was going to give us specifics without ever giving us those specifics. And I think what happened is the governor realized that it's very difficult to say, I'm going to spend $15 million to reduce this problem, when you really need to look at the problem over a long term. And I think you can't really deal with it without also talking about reducing the achievement gap. And the achievement gap, unfortunately, has become a problem that everybody likes to admire, but nobody likes to make the tough decisions to actually solve it. And that's what we've been pushing, and we want to make sure that we're giving those students the opportunity to be successful. And we know that in the future, that will reduce that disparity in wages.
Mr. Speaker, you fundamentally disagree with the governor that spending more on pre-kindergarten programs will reduce the achievement gap, is that correct?
We just don't think it's the best investment. We know that the program similar to what we did last session, where we invested in early education scholarships, and actually that's for 3 and 4-year-olds, has a much better statistical chance of reducing the achievement gap based on the results of other states who have done similar things. And we know that sometimes those families that are need that service for those kids when they're 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. So why are we providing money for a student in Egan or Edina to go to preschool when students in 3-year-olds in Minneapolis or St. Paul, minority students, don't have that. We think it's much better to target those investments, and if we actually want to reduce the achievement gap, that's what the data shows will do it. And we're more than willing to work with the governor to accomplish that. I think we took a big step together last session with those early education scholarships, and I think we've got an opportunity to continue that. But I think we also need to see make sure that the investment we made last session is in the right place and it's working properly. So it may take a little bit of time to make sure that we have it exactly the way that it's going to be successful. So, other questions? Very good. Well, thank you all very much.
Actually, sorry, what's your response to the hard partisan swipes made in the speech?
Which one?
Or the plural ones?
I don't. Yeah, which one? The governor and I have a good working relationship. We don't agree on every issue, and we don't agree on the path to get to every goal that we might have in common. But I think we do work well together. There have been some forums recently where words have gotten a little bit sharp, and has given me some reason to be a little bit nervous about how we're going to get through this session. But it was nice to hear the governor set a tone tonight, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to focus on the areas where there was sharp partisan jabs, and I'm going to focus on the areas where I think we can work together. And I've said that consistently as we get ready for session, that I think this session, maybe what we should do is focus on first the areas where we agree, and then talk about other things. Let's do the basics well first, and focus on common agreement. I think Minnesotans would really appreciate that. So, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, first, I hope with regard to the Iron Range extension of unemployment benefits, the Speaker stands by the words he just ended with. Let's start with the things we agree with and deal with those things first, and then move on to the things that are a bit more contentious. The things we all agree on is we should extend those benefits to the folks up in northeastern Minnesota. The Speaker either has a short memory or has a challenge with the truth. I told him immediately before the speech tonight that we didn't agree on the $272 million tax cut. So for him to stand in front of you tonight and say that no one has told him that, I think that calls something into question. I thought the governor's speech tonight was excellent. It's nice to see someone who actually takes the job of governing seriously in this country these days, compared to what's going on at the presidential level. As an example, the governor demonstrated what our politics ought to be about. And I'm very proud to be a Minnesotan and have our governor be that kind of leader. I'm going to let Senator Bach go next, and then we can answer some questions.
Well, thank you, Paul. I thought the governor set a good tone in reaching out to the legislature in a bipartisan way. I really appreciated his early remarks about what a great state we all live in. I mean, I think it's important that governors remind us about the quality of life we have in this state, the strong business infrastructure we have, how we're leading the nation in so many ways. So, I've often felt that governors need to be the state's cheerleader, and I thought he led very strongly on that. On his agenda for the legislative session, I think I can say the Senate's on a very parallel track. We deeply care about the fiscal stability of the state's budget. We're going to be back here a year from now with a new legislature, putting a new 2-year budget together, and we don't want to make decisions this year that put the state back into crisis management. So I appreciate the fact that he indicated that was his #1 priority. Also, the Senate has been trying hard for a number of years to get something significant done on transportation. I really appreciate the governor's attention to that and his strong position on investing in the public infrastructure in our state. So we look forward to working with them on those priorities. We look forward to providing a very targeted but responsible tax bill that'll provide some tax relief to middle-income Minnesotans that we know many who are still struggling. So with that, I think we'll be happy to take questions.
Does very targeted go beyond the child care tax credit expansion that the governor specifically mentioned tonight?
Well, we are going to name the Senate tax conferees tomorrow. I was pleased to see that the House has already done that for the tax bill and the transportation bill. We will be doing that tomorrow in the Senate. So we will get those conference committees back to work. I think that gives us, actually not getting that work done last year, puts us at a huge advantage this year for a starting place to get to the conversation about a tax bill and a transportation bill. There are some things in the Senate tax bill that I think before the forecast we really would have liked to have accomplished, but it got more difficult with the updated budget forecast. I do think the Senate is still pretty interested in a workforce housing tax credit. I mean, there are places around this state where businesses want to expand, but purely can't because they have no workforce. And they have no workforce because they couldn't bring people in, even if they could find them, because there are no place for them to live. And it runs all the way from down in Worthington up to Roseville. So there are some pockets around the state that I think rural economies could benefit a great deal by doing something with a workforce housing tax credit. I would, as being the architect in 2010 of a significant expansion of the research and development tax credit, I'm interested in building on that. The Senate has some language in our Senate tax bill in the conference committee on that. I've often felt that tax policy is very, very important, and you need to focus it in ways where you're going to create economic growth. So we're going to be, I think, very careful that in addition to, and I believe the Senate will have a strong support for the governor's position on the child care tax credit, but in addition to that, we do some things that help stimulate the economy, especially in rural areas of the state.
Senator, did the governor's pledge to work on the unemployment tax reduction separately this session help get that unemployment benefit issue moving quicker? Do you think it changes the House's?
Well, I think it certainly is helpful when the governor makes a strong statement like that. The Speaker and I had a good conversation today about the whole unemployment issue. You know, at the end of March, another large cohort of Minnesotans on the Iron Range are going to be exhausting their unemployment. So there is some significant urgency in getting this done. We had a good conversation today about both of those issues, the unemployment and the tax issue. I'm actually meeting tomorrow morning with the unemployment division over at Deed to talk about the tax provisions, because I haven't been part of any of those discussions of what that rebate would look like, who would get it, how much is prudent to do. And then the Speaker and I talked about trying to get back together sometime later tomorrow, talk about is there a deal on this, because the Senate is going to pass a clean bill on an unemployment extension for those laid off Iron Rangers tomorrow. And my hope is that the Speaker and I can reach an agreement on a path forward so that they can take it up tomorrow when they receive it, because they'll be coming in later in the afternoon after the Senate has met in the morning. So that really is my goal, is to try to find a way to land that bill on the governor's desk this weekend.
After you're doing, it was a very short session here. How much do you think realistically you'll be able to get done in the 10 weeks of service that you have?
Well, I mean, I don't know. We introduced 185 bills yesterday in the Senate. We've got a backlog of stuff left from last year. I imagine there'll be another 100 bills tomorrow. I don't know what all is there. I can tell you, I have a few priorities that are important to me that I, as the leader, am going to try and move forward. On the policy side, and First, we're going to try deal with policy and move those things along because of the very early deadlines. I mean, on April 1st is the first deadline, and a bill has to be out of the policy committees either in the House or the Senate. So there's some urgency in trying to move policy stuff early, especially bills that have to go through a number of committees. So we're probably not going to talk a lot about spending bills and what our priorities are there until we get some of the policy provisions moved along. We don't have enough hearing rooms in the new building to accommodate committee hearings for both policy committees and finance committees during the day. So we've got to give hearing room priority to the policy committees here up until the committee deadlines. And I can tell you my first policy priority after the unemployment is going to be paid family leave. And that bill has to go through a number of committees, so its first hearing in the Senate, I believe, will be next Monday. I'm looking forward to that conversation. I have reached out to the business community, both chamber and business partnership, way back in July, and sat down physically with them and asked them to figure out what is it that you could support so that we can improve workplaces for families when they have medical issues or new children in their family. So I started on this more than 6 months ago and made it clear to the business community it was important to me. So that probably after unemployment is my #1 priority, but there won't be time for everything.
And I would just say, I think that's a great question. You know, there's a lot of talk about kind of the politics and the short session and budget, you know, all those limitations. I just hope we don't give up on the session before it even begins, and I'm starting to get the sense that some people are starting to do that. And we need to make sure that we are as bold and ambitious as we possibly can be, because the people of Minnesota deserve that.
Senator, to clarify there, unpaid family leave, are you talking about the governor's proposal strictly for state employees or Senator Stevens' broader proposal?
I'm a co-author on Senator Stevens' bill. And I think before people get too alarmed, it's going to go through changes. It has to go through a number of committees. And there is a provision in the introduction that provides for businesses that are already doing this to be able to have an off-ramp, because we certainly want to reward businesses that are already doing this and acknowledge their efforts. So I think people should be a little careful to rush to judgment. I want people to work with us as we move this forward. I want the business community to work with us as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you all.